Okay, I'm not Rajivan, firstly. Neither am I Advay Mitra. So I guess I don't know enough about monsoons, neither do I know enough about macro random fields, but that's what I will talk about. So, okay, so thanks to organizers for putting me in this spot on the last minute notice. This talk will be quite different from the previous talks. I will talk much less about monsoons, much more about data analysis methods, essentially. So the main, so the Markov random field model that I will talk about is a method that is used mostly in machine learning community in order to identify patterns in video images and other kind of images. Our main aim in trying to understand our main aim in using this type of method that was used in video analytics for monsoon data sets was try to identify patterns, spatial patterns, and hopefully also temporal patterns that can be obtained purely from the data and see what we can learn from it. So it is a complex phenomena. We would like to try to reduce it to as simple terms as possible, but purely by using data. I can't really claim that we have succeeded in doing that, but it's a beginning, and we are still continuing to do this with. So what I will present will be only results with a limited data set. So hopefully, when we apply to larger data sets, we should learn much more. Okay, so I'll mostly focus on trying to explain at least what the method is, and then what are the main results that we get, and we'll see. Okay. So the Markov random field model, essentially, it's a network of random variables with the edges being the joint distribution of these random variables, and that's a Markov random field model. Okay, so that doesn't seem anything like the type of models that you guys have talked about. It's not, and so let me take a minute to explain what this is. So the S variables. So each of these, think of these as space and time, right? So it's ZST, which means that as you go across a row, you are changing the time, and as we are going down the column, we are changing space. And so these are, and associated to each space-time point, there is a Z variable, which simply indicates whether it's in, you can call it active or a break phase, or high or low rainfall, and the X variable, which is the actual rainfall amount at that point. And the analysis I will present will be for about 8 years monsoon data, so 122 days in the monsoon period for 8 years, and that will be the length of the data set in time. And in space, it was 1 degree resolution data set from Rajivan of, so that will be about 357 locations over Indian region. And that's the main sort of say network. And the way we think about it is that each day is related to its immediate past and future. And so that's a link in time. And each day is also related to its nearest spatial neighbors. So I couldn't show 4 connections, but anyway, so the spatial connections are nearest neighbor in space, and the temporal connections are also nearest neighbor in time. And that's what we started with. We are exploring possibilities of extending this to more complicated spatial connections. We haven't thought about how to make it more complicated in time yet. And so that is sort of say the network, right? And why random variables? So as I said, interpretation. So Z is indicating low and high rainfall. So think of it as active and break phase. And X is the actual data, actual rainfall amount at that location. There are two additional variables, u and v. I will not really focus much on v at all. I will mostly talk about the u variable. It's an integer valued variable. It simply indicates the number of clusters that we eventually form. So it's something like the k-means clustering that was presented earlier, but not quite. So we will be talking about how many clusters that we get. So we would like to cluster days into different clusters. So each cluster will indicate some kind of close association to each other. So if the day 1, 3, and 7 belong to one cluster, that means that they have similar rainfall patterns. And similarity I will define in a minute, hopefully. And why are these called random variables? Because we do not associate, we actually give probability distribution to each of these variables rather than saying exactly what the value is. So in particular, for example, the probability that Z is 0, that is, it's a low rainfall day, is assigned, and the probability that it is a high rainfall day is assigned. And so it's not that you simply say that whether it is a low or high rainfall day, but you assign a probability to being a low rainfall or a high rainfall day at that location. So ZST is actually a random variable in that sense. And similar thing applies to U and V. So the probability that a day belongs to a certain cluster is assigned. And we essentially then look at the highest probability events, or we look at the mode of this probability distribution. And so essentially look at the highest probability statements that we can make. X is also thought of as a continuous random variable, which is the rainfall itself. The reason for doing that is that we effectively construct a model which is a probability distribution, which is a joint distribution for all of these, and then eventually condition on X. So I will come to that in a minute. But in the model, the rainfall itself is a random variable as well, right? Okay, so sorry, I guess maybe I should have started with this picture. So another way to represent this is that we have these Z variables associate, and each of the Z variables are so to say linked to the nearest neighbors in space and the nearest neighbors in time, and so that is the spatiotemporal structure of this model. Yeah. And as I said, U are the variables which assign a day's rainfall all over India to a specific cluster. So the first day could be the first cluster, the 10th day to be some other cluster, and so on. Right? So the MRF model basically is defined by, as I said, a conditional, a probability distribution for each of these variables. The edge potentials, the edges joining the random variables, as defined in the network, specify edge potential or a probability distribution of the joint probability distributions of the random variables that are connected by the edge. And the available rainfall data is thought of as a specific realization on which we condition. So instead of looking at the joint distribution of Z, U, V, and X, you condition on the actual available rainfall. So it is now a distribution for Z, U, and V conditioned on the rainfall that's given. So effectively it tells that given what we have seen, the actual rainfall that we see, conditioned on that, what is the probability of calling day 1 at location X to be a high rainfall event or a low rainfall event? And the same thing for it belonging to a specific cluster. So, so that's what the conditional variable, conditional distribution gives us. That given specific rainfall, then what is the probability of each of these things, right? And that's the main, we think, as an advantage, rather than deterministic assignment of active and break phases or low and high rainfall or clusters. These are now probabilistic statements that we can make. So the essential central inference step is to sample this distribution using Gibbs sampling algorithm that we use, but we could use possibly other algorithms to sample this distribution. And the patterns or these clusters that we talk about are now, suppose there is a set of days that have been assigned to cluster number u. So u is an integer. So if there are multiple clusters, let's say L clusters, so u goes from 1 to L. So you look at all the days that are assigned to the cluster u and take the average of the rainfall over all those set of days, and that will be called a rainfall pattern for the cluster u. And that's phi u. And then we could also take the mode of the variable z. The variable z was this discrete variable saying whether it is in a high or low rainfall event. So of course, since it's a discrete random variables, we can't really look at the mean or the average. We have to look at the mode. And the mode over all days assigned to that cluster u is defined by phi ud. That's a discrete pattern. So that shows which of the locations belong to low rainfall event versus which of the locations which belong to high rainfall event with highest probability, because this is the mode. And so these are the kind of patterns, the spatial patterns that I will be discussing most of the time. We can do the similar thing for temporal patterns, but I will not really talk about temporal patterns here. It is still partly work in progress, so I will not discuss the temporal structure of this data much. Okay, so just to put back in the context in which I had started here, suppose you have multiple different locations, and in time we assign different dates to different clusters, and in space we assign different locations to different clusters. Right? So each spatial and temporal location is now say partitioned into either spatial clusters or temporal clusters. The days are the days are divided up into clusters, and the locations are also divided up into clusters. And that's the output of this MRF network model. Right? And so just to so the main input effectively is the kind of probability distribution that you assign to these edge potentials, or the kind of probability distribution that you assign to the edges connecting the different spatial and the different temporal locations. So how do we do that? So as I said, so the edge potentials are the probability distributions of the things that are assigned by the by edges, and the edge potentials are used to encode the domain knowledge. For example, when there is a threshold, so the z variables which assign the high and low rainfall are not assigned in terms of a predefined threshold as such. So there is no predefined threshold at any spatial location that says whether it is a high or low rainfall event, but that threshold is in some sense a variable or it's a parameter of the model that is deduced from the data. So the sampling that we do indicates what the threshold for saying high and low rainfall is, rather than setting it in any kind of a priori way. Right? So that threshold comes in as an output of the statistical analysis rather than input that we give to it. The clustering variables also tell how the spatial patterns align with the pattern of each day, and so the edge potentials are the thing that we can play around with in order to understand how robust the model can be. Right? So we can, of course, the natural question is, if we change the edge potentials, do we get wildly different results? And that's one of the things that we have checked, and that does not happen. In fact, even by changing the edge potentials from something like gamma distributions to Gaussian distributions, the results still remain pretty robust, which is a good thing. Otherwise, it will be a pretty arbitrary, in some sense, model, right? Okay, so the edges between various variables are defined by the edge potential. So there are gamma distribution that give the relationship between the rainfall and, or rather, the distribution for the rainfall is a gamma distribution. given specific values of Z. The parameters that are used to describe the gamma distributions are inferred from the model. They are not pre-assigned. The edge potentials between the clustering variables and the discrete random variables are exponential distributions. And again, these control parameters that come in the model are inferred from the models rather than having a pre-assigned set of values. And okay, so that basically describes the model, right? So we have edge potentials, gamma distributions are exponential, gamma distributions are exponential distributions, and the various parameters that are inferred from the model. And the mode and the mean of this is what gives the patterns that we look for. Right? So just a summary, the MRF model consists of discrete random variables. You can think of this as a coarse-grained structure, a coarse-grained picture of the monsoon rainfall. It can incorporate the domain knowledge in terms of probability distribution of these discrete random variables. And the inference is in terms of the conditional distribution that is conditioned on the observed rainfall data. And the main aim is to try to find clustering of the locations and the dates in order to identify dominant patterns that are obtained purely from the data. So one way to think about this kind of method could be that it's an analogous but alternative technique to, let's say, EOF. Right? So rather than, so EOF is purely, essentially a linear technique, right? You're trying to find dominant singular vectors, or eigenvectors that are given by the data. But so the picture that I like to keep in mind is it's something like follows. If your data in some, let's say you think of the rainfall data, the rainfall vectors for each day adds the data set. So since we have 357 different locations, I think of this as a data set in 357 dimensional space. I can draw it, so that's a 357 dimensional space. EOF would think of giving you the dominant, so to say, the eigenmodes or the singular modes of the data. But of course, that is useful if your data is something like a elliptical data set and it gives you the dominant, what do you call those things? The principal axis, thank you. The principal axis of this ellipse. If the data set does not have this kind of structure, then the EOF analysis does not really tell you anything. So for example, if the data has, say, structure like this, then the EOF will give you dominant modes, but then those dominant modes really don't tell you anything about the data at all. And this is one of the things that we are still exploring as to what exactly is the geometrical structure of this data set. We don't know the answer at all yet, but the MRF model does not, in some sense, assume any kind of a priori structure to the data at all. And so that's one of the possible advantages of such methods. But the interpretation becomes significantly more complicated then, and we are still working on exactly what to do with the interpretation. Okay, so are there questions about, yes, maybe it's a good point. No, so in this picture, the spacebar didn't come because I said that if I think of each vector of rainfall on any given day as one data point, then so there is also this other problem that how do you slice the data? If you want to look at a spatial structure, then you would probably want to take the time series and look at the time series at different locations and compare them in some sense. So that's not, yeah, we thinking of this in the kind of picture that I drew, then you wouldn't see the, then I wouldn't see, yeah, then that's a different, we have different nodes for different spaces. In the MRF model, yes. Yeah. But what I drew there is only one way of thinking about the data set, right? If you're just given that spatiotemporal data, then how to even slice it in the first place is not a priori defined. And right now I'm simply saying that, okay, take all the data at one given day as one data point. And then, yeah.
So can one of your mode
Yeah.
a shape of one of your mode can go to shape of another mode.
So let me show the shapes.
Capture the transition.
So let me show let me show actually the modes and so on. So this was halfway through my talk as a summary of the method that we are thinking about, and let me present the results, and maybe I will come back to your question if that's. Yes, I still have a few. Yes, I still have a few more slides to go to actually show the actual results of what the method gives. And so let me show the actual modes, and then I will hopefully answer the question. If not, then please ask me again. Yeah. Okay. This is summary so far. So the results. So here are, so to say, the dominant spatial patterns that we find. Dominant in the sense that a large number of days, 95% of the days in the data set that we saw, 110-year data set, fit into one of these are close enough to one of these 10 patterns. And this is, as I said, so this is the discrete Z variable, high and low rainfall. And okay, so I mean, some of them may look almost identical, right? This one and that one look almost identical. But if you look at the actual rainfall associated to these patterns, so this is only the Z variable, they are significantly different. Oh, sorry, it doesn't look good at all. Okay, anyway, sorry. So, but at least if we focus, let's say, on these two patterns, right, which look almost similar in the discrete variable, but in the actual rainfall, the continuous variable, the mean of the rainfall, there is significant difference. For example, here there is a lot more rainfall here than here, and so on. So, sorry, the spatial structure is almost impossible to see across these different. Yeah, no, please go ahead. They with very high. So since there are only 10 patterns, and this is a 357-dimensional space, with high probability they are independent, linearly independent. They are not orthogonal at all. So they don't give you an orthogonal basis at all. They are linearly independent with high probability, right? There are only 10 of them. So 10 vectors in 357 dimensions, they will be linearly independent, but not orthogonal. Yeah. So that's one of the main differences between EOF and DIS, that they do not give you orthogonal vectors. So in fact, I don't think it's good to think about these as vectors in which you want to project. So projection on these is probably not a good idea. They are not orthogonal for one. It's not really a good idea to. Yeah, so they don't give you any kind of basis of this dominant basis or anything at all. So the EOF for the same data set looks something like this. It does not really look, sorry, the resolution is not good enough to actually see any differences at all. Sorry. But this is the EOF for the same data set, 10 most dominant modes of the same data set. And so these are orthogonal vectors, whereas the MRF modes are not orthogonal vectors in the space. So going back to your question, this was in that space of 357 dimensions, and these are something. And so I don't know where they lie. So I don't know the geometry of this at all yet, in some sense, right? I don't know what the structure of the data in that space is. But the other possible picture in terms of clustering. So the EOF thinks in terms of these ellipses, right? The clustering thinks in terms of, okay, so let me erase this. And so in the same space, if the data were something like this, that there are lots of points here, there are lots of points there, and lots of points there, then you would think of trying to do clustering in terms of 3 specific clusters, right? But a priori, we don't know how many clusters we have. So that's one of the things that the other methods that are used for clustering. So we compared this to, say, the k-means clustering, which is a commonly used method as well. You have to pre-specify the number of clusters that you need to find from the data. The MRF method does not pre-specify. It tells you what are the most dominant clusters that you can get. And in this case, it happened to be 10. And then we specified 10 as a number to k-means, and the k-means modes give something like this. And one of the things that we see from k-means is that it's very spatially, localized. and it's not spatially well distributed. So we think that these kind of modes have spatial structure which actually has more relevance to the actual monsoon dynamics, and that's one of the things that we are exploring, how to interpret that sentence that I just said. Okay, so we have compared this with k-means as well as spectral clustering methods and so on, and to EOFs as well. But these comparisons are still in preliminary stage. We would like to do much more in terms of understanding what actually the structure of the data is, so to say, the geometrical structure of the data. Okay, so I will not go through the actual numerical comparisons. Just partly to come back to Arindam's question in some sense, hopefully, we can assign each day to a specific cluster, right, to a specific pattern. And then we can understand, so we basically get a sequence of patterns. Day 1 is in pattern 1, pattern 3, pattern 7, pattern 5, 10, so on and so forth. And we can think of this as a Markov chain in time. And these are the transition matrices of that Markov chain. This is pattern numbers 1 through 10, pattern numbers 1 through 10, and the probability of transition from pattern 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, and so on is what is indicated here. And they are diagonally dominant, so there is a tendency to stay in the same pattern. So the temporal smoothness of the data set is shown by the diagonal dominance. You tend to stay in the same pattern. If you take away the diagonal, then you see some kind of patterns of roughly block diagonal structure in some way, but this is still not quite, this is something we are still exploring, the Markov chain structure of this data set, and we don't have very concrete results about this yet, but it gives a way to try to think about a temporal dynamics of this pattern. Okay, sorry, so let's not go through this. So just a quick summary, we can construct a stochastic dynamics over these 10 patterns. There are different patterns which are associated with different periods of the monsoon that can be further explored. The temporal coherence is captured by the diagonal dominance of this transition matrix, and some of the transitions actually appear frequently. So what is the physical mechanism behind this is something that we can try to explore as well. And an extension to multivariable scenario is something that we are really keen on. Now can we introduce, let's say, OLR in this mix? If we look at the joint dynamics of OLR or joint, not dynamics in this case, joint statistical analysis of OLR and rainfall, and what does it say about this, or possibly SST or other variables that are known to be related to rainfall clearly, but what can we say statistically about these relationships, just purely from the data, and then eventually how do we take this to, so there are lots of further exploration. How do we come up with simple dynamical models that mimic these kind of clustering and patterns, for example? How do we introduce other random variables? Physical interpretation that we can assign to these patterns, and what can we do with it? So there are a lot, actually more open questions than what we have discussed. So thanks. I'll stop here.
A couple of quick questions.
Amit, an interesting method of looking at rainfall. Okay, maybe right now you've not done it, is, what would be the dominant pattern that you would get during an active phase of monsoon and a break phase of monsoon? How are they in your method? That would be a very interesting question to look.
Right. Yeah. So we are trying to think about a couple of possible ways. One is to, let's say you only take the active days data set and then understand what the patterns are, or take only the break phase. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to take the full data set and now understand with high probability which patterns get assigned to active days and which days, and that's something that we are still looking at. And the other thing that's not quite clear is to how this method generalizes, or rather the robustness of this in terms of spatial resolution. So when you try to apply the same method to 0.25 resolution data, it has a lot more information, a lot more high frequency information, but for this type of method, it looks like noise, I feel. But anyway, so we are still exploring how to apply this to across different resolutions in data, either temporal or spatial resolutions. And that is something, and that may actually have more to say about even this type of question that you asked about, because the high resolution data set, I think, has much more information about active and break phases than this low resolution data. But we haven't made our method to work on the high resolution yet at all. So it's something work in progress. Did I answer your question, Arindam? Partly at least? Somewhat? Okay. Oh, sorry? Okay.
Transition method, you can use it for prediction, real prediction.
We haven't done it, so I don't know.
Have you looked at the eigenvalue spectrum?
No, we haven't done any of this yet. So eigenvalue spectrum, that's straightforward, but that will not be enough to actually do prediction. That may not be enough to do a prediction well, right? What's the predictive power of this Markov chain? It's something that we are not very sure at all.
Right. Amit, yes, yeah. So to Ravi's question, I mean also to the point of whether high resolution data has more noise. So you are taking 357 points and daily rainfall.
That's it, yeah.
Only rainy days or just a time series at those?
122 days.
Yeah, so
June 1st to September 30th.
all season, right?
Yeah.
And so you have spatial and temporal information. So theoretically, you have active break periods in there.
Yeah.
But also this idea of calling noise, I'm not...
Oh, no. So that I said, no, I said it has more information, which may look like noise to this model. That's a possibility, right? I don't know. I don't know what's the case, right?
Because when I look at the maps, I showed few years of maps, how different they look. It seems like, for me, it's like land heats and it becomes like a popcorn kettle. Then popcorns are popping many places. The large-scale constraints or regimes are defined by how quickly they can get moisture. And then there is a feedback. If somebody starts to rain, then they can withdraw more moisture. So I think there is time persistence and feedback, which I don't know how your system will calculate, but
No, I mean, this model is purely statistical. So,
no, it is, but it
so
should.
for one, unless we put in additional variables,
Right.
none of what you said can be captured by...
No, I think if you look
That's
at
it.
persistence scales at your...
so persistence scale, that could be.
Okay, so let us thank Professor Apte again. And sorry to interrupt, we can carry over your question for the tea session.